What's happening? Happy hump day on this Wednesday to you and yours. Thanks for joining us as always. It is much appreciated, and I am happy to have this guy on the show today. You all know him, Evan Lazar, Patriots Unfiltered, Patriots.com. Catch 22 with Alex Barth. He does great work. I appreciate everything he does at the .com. Evan Lazar, man, thanks for joining us. I can't say enough about you.
Oh, thanks for having me on. I really appreciate it.
All right, let's get into the football. So, first and foremost, let's talk wide receiver because a lot of people, this has been triggering the last couple of weeks. So let's start with the Jerry Jeudy contract that happened yesterday. Evan, if you're Elliott Wolf and you see that contract come across your phone, do you regret not maybe trumping Tennessee's offer for Calvin Ridley?
It's a good question. I've always been a Jerry Jeudy truther to an extent because he's one of those guys that really separates at the top of the route and consistently is among the league leaders and separation per target and things like that. But at the same time, he obviously has flaws to his game, whether it's on the field with play strength and things like that, hands, or just work ethic in general and just drive. Someone that doesn't necessarily go all out on every single play, and yet he still gets paid. And I think you look at guys like him, even a guy like Ridley to an extent, when you were a first round pick and you have that grade from a couple years ago for every team that had you as a lock first round guy, the talent is so enticing that teams are going to pay for it. And I think that that's where Jerry Jeudy falls in, where his production hasn't necessarily been off the charts, but everybody remembers what he was in the draft 4 years ago and what he was coming out of Alabama and the flashes that he's put in the NFL, and thinks, all we got to do is put it together for this guy and he's going to have the production. So I think that's where Cleveland comes from. In terms of the Patriots, my antennas went up to Amari Cooper and said, are they going to pay all these guys in Cleveland? Are they looking to move Amari Cooper? Because I look at him as, well, first of all, he's been in this offense, so he knows the offense really well and has produced in the offense. And secondly, he is getting a little bit up there in age, and maybe they're looking to make Jerry Jeudy the next Amari Cooper, and the beat goes on in Cleveland. So if I'm the Patriots, I'm starting to think about calling my old friends in Cleveland and saying, hey, does this make Amari Cooper expendable?
What would you be willing to give up for Amari Cooper? I look at it and say maybe a late pick swap, maybe a 6th round pick. Would you go richer than that for him?
Well, he didn't go for much when he went from Dallas to Cleveland, so I can't think that his value is going to increase tremendously. So yeah, I'm with you. I would say, something starting in day 3 of the draft would make sense for Cooper, and it would be a similar move for the Patriots as what they were hoping to do with Calvin Ridley, which is just to give the quarterback next year some sort of basis of NFL production and experience in the receiver room, so that they don't go in there with a rookie alongside them and expect Drake May and Tez Walker to just start lighting the world on fire right out of the gate. So I would like that move. I think all of us are clamoring for that receiver trade, and maybe that's it.
All right, we got a lot to get to. We got about 30 minutes with Evan. So I'm going to look more at big picture stuff for free agency, get a little granular a little bit later with the draft and everything. But simply, your favorite signing up to this point by Elliott Wolf?
Ooh, favorite signing. I would actually say Jacoby Brissett. I think Jacoby Brissett is one of those players, and I'm talking about external signings. Obviously, I think guys that they brought back were really solid moves as well. But I look at Jacoby Brissett as the perfect player for the role that they're going to ask him to play. And I published a film review today because I went into his Browns tape from 2022 expecting to be a little bit concerned about the fact that he might be the starter come September for this team in the short term. But I actually came away really impressed with what he was able to put on film. And I know they didn't win a lot of games with him as the starter, but you look at the way that he functioned in that offense, you look at the downfield throws he made in the offense, whether it was off play action, drop back pass game, his scrambling ability, his ability to extend plays in the pocket with good pocket mobility. He made a lot more plays than I was expecting. I thought he was sort of trying to manage games, protect the football, do that sort of thing in Cleveland. And it was kind of the total opposite. He was somebody that was really going out there and trying to be a little bit of a gunslinger. So I'm impressed with Brissett. I know that all of the off-field stuff and the character and tangible stuff is off the charts with him as well. But I think if you're the Patriots, you just wanted to have somebody in the building that allowed you not to rush the rookie quarterback on the field. If he's not ready week 1, we don't feel like we absolutely have to put him on the field in week 1. And I think Jacoby Brissett checks that box.
Yeah, I said this yesterday, Evan. They did upgrade the quarterback room, and people might look at it and go, what? It's Jacoby Brissett. Well, the level of quarterback play you got from both Mack and of course, Bailey last year wasn't good enough. And so I do think it's an upgrade. Even if it's a slight upgrade, you got better in that quarterback room. And of course, we'll talk about this in a little bit. We don't think they're done at quarterback. All right, the signing, Evan, that you look at and you might not be as high on as maybe some others.
Yeah, I think after watching the film of Sion Takitaki, I just wonder where he fits into this. And I know that we all instantly went to Mac Wilson's replacement, but I actually look at them as pretty different players, especially the way that they use Mac Wilson down the stretch last year as more of a pass rusher, third down, it really on the edge mostly in that Josh Uche type role. And I look at Taki Taki, and I think that there's some good tape of him off the ball at inside linebacker, and he can cover and he can run sideline to sideline a little bit, but he's not going to take on very many blocks. He's not going to make very many impact or splash plays on the football. He's just somebody that I saw out there doing his 111th. And there's definitely value to that, but it's not like he was someone that really moved the needle. I didn't think based off of what I saw for the Browns. So not a bad football player, just when they signed him, you hear a lot of people in Cleveland saying, oh, this is a great signing by the Patriots. This guy's really, really good. I didn't necessarily see the impact plays on the football that I was hoping to see. Whereas with Mac Wilson, there was a lot of splash, but maybe not the consistency. I think this is the total opposite, more of a lunch pail guy versus somebody that was going to make some of those plays on the ball.
Evan talks about moving the needle. Let's move the needle on this podcast with viewers and listeners. The way we do that is pressing that thumbs up on the YouTube channel. Of course, it's all about the algorithm, unfortunately, in this world. So give us that like while you're watching. If you don't like me, like it for Evan. He's a very likable guy. So like, comment, and subscribe. Trying to hit 3,000 subscribers by April 8th, the national championship game. So let's try to get to that. We're about 400 away or so, a little less than 400 away. So let's try to get to that mark. And rate and review if you're listening on Spotify, Apple Pods, as we always say. And finally, the Patreon channel, patreon.com/Nick Cattles, Cattles. We did a Discord chat last night, trying to figure out the whole Discord situation. I think we did a pretty good job, but you can check out the Patreon as well. Let's jump in here quickly. I don't want to take too many super chats because I got questions for Evan, and he's got to run in about 20, 25 minutes. He's, got a call with KJ Osborne or something later on. So let's go to the New England Patriot kid. Should we go after an X receiver in the second round, or should we try to get a left tackle in the second round, Evan Lazar?
Yeah, it's a good question because I think once you start passing that 34th pick at tackle, you are getting worried about guys that can come in and step in right away and play right away. You get into that Patrick Paul, Blake Fisher. I can't pronounce his name, so I just call him the kid from Yale. You get into that category, and you start to think about more developmental guys that are more, players that have high upside, but you're hoping that maybe they can start down the line versus day one impact players. But at the same time, I do look at this draft at 34 and think that they're in a decent spot to get an impact receiver, whether it's one of those guys that slips through the cracks of the first round. And, I look at a guy like Xavier Worthy, A.D. Mitchell, those types of players. Are they going to be lock first rounders? I think Daniel Jeremiah had Mitchell at 32 to the Chiefs in his latest mock draft. So we're right at the end of the first round there. So maybe a player that you could see falling to 34. Maybe you trade up 5 or 6 spots at the end of the first round to make sure you get the guy. So I'm starting to lean a little bit more towards receiver and then maybe making tackle your biggest need in 2025.
All right, let's continue to talk about tackle. I got to ask you, any tackles out there right now that you could see as a bridge to 2025?
Yeah, I think, the most consistent veteran guy is probably Charles Leno, who was with Washington last year, a little bit up there in age, 32 years old. But when you watch him on film, you see a guy that can step in and play the position at a decent level. Maybe not a high end starter, but more like a low end starter level, and just kind of carry you through the season at that spot. And maybe between him and Chuck Okorafor, you have enough there to just get you through the 2024 season with a developmental guy on the bench and maybe a 2025 need at the top of the draft. But I also look at Mekhi Becton and just think this is one of those teams the Patriots right now that can afford to take some lottery tickets at some of these positions. And Becton is one of those guys that if he could ever put it all together and stay on the field, his talent is immense. So maybe you get one of both. Maybe you get a guy like Mekhi Becton, who I think is a high upside play, a lottery ticket that if it cashes, you're going to have a really good player.
Yeah, I had a really good friend down in Virginia who was a Louisville fan. I watched a lot of Mekhi Becton and Lamar Jackson for a couple of years, and that dude's super talented. It's just, the weight is an issue. It's been a problem, and the injuries from time to time have been a problem, but I think you're right. The ceiling is there, and I've been preaching about Charles Leno now for the last week or two. As soon as we figured out that Tyron Smith was not going to be a Patriot, kind of pivoted to that guy because I think Leno is a solid 1-year bridge to maybe getting somebody younger in there. Speaking on the left tackle, let's talk more about the offensive line. You brought up Chuck Okorafor. Now, Doug Kyed, in the last few days, he wrote at the Herald that there are people in the Patriots organization that think Okorafor could play left tackle. Now, Evan, he's played right tackle almost his entire career at the NFL level. I think he's had like 2 snaps on the left side, but he did play left side in college. Your thoughts if we're walking into game 1 that matters with Okorafor at left tackle and Mike Onwenu at right tackle?
I don't love it. I'm not gonna pretend that it's a great combination. I think with Chuck Okorafor, most of his experience has been on the right side, mainly because of his overall ability to cover space in pass sets and in the passing game as a pass protector. So he's not exactly the most nimble of foot or somebody that can protect his corner from the landmarks and things like that standpoint, as well as maybe some other guys. So he's someone that I think is a really strong player. You're not going to run through him. He's a good run blocker for the most part. His body control is a little bit of a work in progress going back to college. But I think in general, he's somebody that plays with good hand strength and good leverage and drive in the run game. So you like a lot of those elements for most teams out on the right side. And on the left side, you worry about pass protection a little bit and if he's going to hold up. So I think that there are some elements to his game that translate to both sides. And I think ideally he's someone that is that swing tackle. That's why he was brought in here. And I think one of the bigger criticisms that I just have of this offseason from the Patriots standpoint is not addressing left tackle with a premium asset in free agency, even if it was a guy like Jonah Williams, who I thought they should have been in on. I just would have liked to have seen them buy themselves some time at that spot because they're not going tackle at 3. At 34, you're starting to get already into developmental guys like a Kingsley Suamatia, for example, from BYU, who's pretty raw and is going to need some time and need some seasoning. So I look at that spot right now as probably the biggest hole on the team. I know a lot of people want the receiver talent, which definitely is an issue. But I think at receiver, you at least have playable guys at those spots right now. Whereas at left tackle, I'm not really sure they have an NFL starter at left tackle at the moment.
All right, let's jump to another super chat. Justin, TF, Patriot. Evan, what's the holdup on signing Justin Simmons? We know you have the pull. Make the call. Hashtag Knicks beer money. Thanks, Justin. So Justin Simmons, your thoughts?
Yeah, really good post safety. And that's what I've always been intrigued by him in this system is that he's one of those guys that can play center field, that can go sideline to sideline, that has really good ball skills in the air. But at the same time, I look at Philadelphia, his old defensive coordinator, head coach, actually, Vic Fangio is now there in Philly. And that seems like where he might be headed. But I would love to throw a bag at Justin Simmons, get him in here and get Kyle Duggar and Jabril Peppers back into their natural spots. I think that was one thing that Devin McCourty talked about when he retired was how are we going to rally to our spots? 3rd down, 2 minutes to go, game's on the line, and we have to get off the field. How are we going to find our sweet spots? Because all of our sweet spots right now with Duggar and Peppers and Phillips last year are kind of overlapping. They're all kind of the same type of safety. So I think that they would really benefit from that true center fielder to take some pressure off those guys from playing that spot.
Evan, Andrew Callahan and Kyed, they wrote before free agency that the Patriots were going to target a big ticket item, right? I don't remember the exact phrasing, but it was an immediate help defensively, a big time target. Are you surprised that they didn't wrap up a bigger name defensively early on in the period?
I am a little bit surprised because I thought that was where the strength of the free agent market was this year, was on the defensive side of the ball. I didn't really see the offensive upside outside of Calvin Ridley and maybe those two tackles that we've already mentioned with Smith and Jonah Williams. It wasn't a ton of starter, move the needle type of guys, difference maker type of guys on offense. And so I looked at defense and you see a guy like Christian Wilkins out there, for example, some of the pass rushers that were available on free agency. And those guys I thought could be more of impactful players. But I think the main thing that happened, especially with a guy like Wilkins, is the money got silly really quickly. And we're talking about paying a guy over $100 million a year, or $100 million total value. And I wonder if they looked at it and said, we had to pay Christian Barmore here at some point. How much money do we really want to have invested in defensive tackle? That's one position that we feel like we actually have some bodies that we can rely on and are big, high impact guys like Barmore. So I think that's what it came down to, is that maybe the money just got a little bit silly for their liking. But I still think that there are some guys out there. The question asked about Justin Simmons, I do think Stephon Gilmore is a possibility. I would love that for them. I think that's a low-key need for them as that third outside cornerback that can play a lot of snaps on the boundary. I like that idea for them as well. So I think that there's still a possibility that we could have a name brand defensive player in the fold.
Totally agree with you about the Barmore side of the Christian Wilkins stuff. I had been saying that from the beginning of the free agency period that, it just wouldn't make too much sense if you're dumping, I don't know how much, 50, 60 million, 70 million guaranteed at the defensive tackle spot. I just thought as soon as you sign Wilkins to that contract, Barmore is going to be banging down that door saying, yeah, now you got to pay me that plus a little bit more. Also agree with you about Stephon Gilmore. I think he'd be a fantastic fit for 1 year. The money shouldn't be too crazy across from Christian Gonzalez. All right, we'll get to the draft in a minute. Before we get to the draft, don't forget, give us that thumbs up. It takes a second of your time. It means a lot to this podcast. One-man band. We're doing it on our own here. So every single like, comment, and subscription helps the show expand the brand, expand the reach. So like, comment, and subscribe. Trying to hit 3,000 subscriptions by the national championship game on April 8th. So if you're jumping in for the first time to see Evan, we'll get right back to Evan in a second on the draft. But give us that thumbs up, comment, subscribe, hang around for a little bit longer. I think if you enjoy Evan's work, you might enjoy my work a little bit as well. So before we get into the draft, rate, review, want to jump in with another super chat. Cool, genuine Phil. Even at 34, does Xavier Legette make sense, Evan?
He's somebody that's definitely rising up the boards. I think before the combine, he was someone that most people had as in the 50 to 100 range of the top 100, maybe a second round pick, early third round pick type of guy. Now you see a lot higher ratings for him, and the buzz is definitely increasing because of the 40 time and the athletic profile really checked out. One of the fastest guys in the flying 20 in the combine on the 40-yard dash, which is the last 20 yards. So that tells you about the build-up speed. We talk a lot about the first 10 and the splits off the line of scrimmage, but the guys that can really pull away, and he's one of those guys. He's also somebody that is great with the ball in his hands. So my comparison for him has been almost a cross between Debo and AJ Brown. He's like right in the middle of the two from a skill set standpoint, where he's got a little bit more receiving skill, natural receiving skill than Debo, but still has that 6'1", 220-pound running back like frame like a Debo. But AJ Brown, maybe a little bit more of a natural pass catcher on the outside. I'm really high on Xavier Legette, and is it maybe a little bit of a reach at 34? Maybe, but it definitely has as much upside as anybody on day two.
I think you and I have a man crush. We share a man crush, and the man crush is A.D. Mitchell. I loved him at Texas, and then I saw him at the combine. I'm like, are you kidding me? But before we get some more receiver talk, are you a stick and pick the quarterback guy at 3?
I am. I think that the biggest thing with it is that you have to. I don't like the notion that just because the roster is ready means you can't pick the quarterback, because the quarterback doesn't have to come in and fix everything all on his own. You don't even have to play the quarterback right away. The point is that this quarterback class and this quarterback prospect is a lot better than what you're going to get in future years. And I feel that way. And I know that every year quarterbacks come out of the woodwork. A guy like Jaden Daniels wasn't necessarily a first round pick a year ago. But I look at next year's quarterback class and it's pretty underwhelming. And I worry about kicking that can down the road consistently. I'd take the quarterback. If you have to sit him because of the supporting cast, you sit him. If he has to develop like a guy like Drake May, you let him develop behind the scenes, and then you worry about it down the road. I think this team is doing themselves a disservice by passing on the quarterback.
Yeah, you got Shedeur Sanders, who will be brought up a lot for 2025. Quinn Ewers is a guy interesting. He's going to actually throw at the pro day at Texas. So you got Ewers as another name. So we'll see how they all come together. Of course, we didn't know Jaden Daniels would all of a sudden go from a possible third-round pick to a top 3 guy either. So we'll see how it all comes together. But I agree with you. I'm a stick and pick guy with the quarterback at 3. If you love him, you take him. Let me see if I can trigger you. Could J.J. McCarthy be the answer at 3?
Oh boy. So here's the thing about JJ McCarthy. There's always one quarterback I feel like that the league, or at least the scuttlebutt from the league, is so much higher on a player, especially at that position, than the draft media is. And JJ McCarthy is that player this year. And I would say in the opposite direction, Drake May is that player this year, where the media loves Drake May and the league is maybe not as high on Drake May. I think what you look at with JJ McCarthy is that teams are enticed by just the floor of quick release, gets the ball out on time, generally accurate, generally has a good arm, generally athletic. Like there's a lot of safe elements to his projection, where you look at some of those intangible stuff as well with the winning at Michigan, and you say, at worst case scenario, he's a game manager for us, Alex Smith type. Best case scenario, he's somebody that can move the needle. And I get that to an extent. I just think that with him, and he's young, and there's going to be time for him to develop in a similar sense as Drake May. But there's a lot of issues with him on film with processing and decision making, and then also mechanics, especially lower body mechanics, where he tends to overstride and really put a lot of his lower body into every single throw. And that's where the ball starts to sail on him, especially when he's throwing to the left-hand side of the field. So you look at that, and it's a two-pronged worry, because one, it's, we got to fix that. We can't be doing that and having the ball go 10 yards over guys' heads on a deep out. And then secondly, if he does start to take some of his lower body out of the throw, does he have the same velo on the ball? And that's, right. I think the bigger thing that I'm more concerned about is we get into muddy pockets in the NFL. Guys are in his lap. He doesn't have that ability now to step into the throw. And does the arm talent look the same? It's great to have the arm talent when you have this clean pocket, or you're on the move and you're outside the pocket and there's nobody coming down on you and it's not a condensed space. But once the space is condensed, what does the arm talent look like? And I think that's a big difference. Something that you learn from a guy like Mac Jones, who at Alabama could really push the ball down the field. Then he gets to the pros and he just doesn't have the arm talent to do it from an NFL pocket. So that's where my concern is with JJ.
His name is Evan Lazar, of course, Patriots.com, Patriots Unfiltered, Catch 22. He's all over the joint. He does some great work. We got some more draft questions for Evan in a minute, but I see the numbers jumping here in the podcast. Lots of new eyeballs. If you're just joining in, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. The likes mean the world to us, so give us that thumbs up, whether it's Facebook, Twitter, or YouTube. More likes means more eyes. Also, comment and subscribe. Trying to hit 3,000 subscriptions by the national championship game on April 8th. And if you like what I do, you can check us out on the Patreon. Exclusive content for you there. Patreon.com/Nick Cattle, CATTLES. $5 for the month, $1.25 a week. Who would you rather have, May or Daniels?
The number one question, right? So I think that, to me, I like both players, and I feel like the disappointing part is that I always feel like I'm tearing down Jaden Daniels whenever I give this take,
right?
Which is really not what I'm trying to do. But my fear with a guy like Jaden Daniels is, how are you going to build the scheme around his skill set? And I would much rather I trust this coaching staff that they've put together to work around Drake May's limitations more than I do with Jaden Daniels. My fear with Jaden Daniels is that you're going to put him in this AVP offense that's this West Coast based scheme, this, Shanahan, Norv Turner type elements, and you're going to try to make him into one of those, bootleg action, hard play action, deep shot quarterbacks on early downs. And then, third down, it's more of the spread stuff and the timing stuff. And I look at all these things and I'm like, I don't think that fits him. I think you have to mold it around his mobility. I think you have to mold it around his ability to throw the deep ball. And those things, I don't know if it's necessarily going to get from point A to point B. Where I look at with Drake May is, yeah, he has some accuracy issues. He's going to have to tighten up his release, all those types of things mechanically that people talk about. But he's got the arm talent. He's got some mobility. He's got some experience in the pistol, turning his back to the line of scrimmage and then getting his eyes back upfield and making throws down the field like he will under center play action. He just fits what they are supposed to be doing a little bit better. And I'd much rather try to give Alex Van Pelt a guy that fits what they want to do versus saying this was just the best quarterback on the board, make it work. And I think that's why I lean a little bit more towards Drake May, because of the scheme fit and what they're able to do with him and some of the different elements that you saw in Cleveland in this offense.
Executive Lazar, say you get your quarterback at 3. You're sitting there at 34. Are you picking up the phone and calling Cincinnati or San Francisco and talking about Ayuk or Higgins?
I am. Yeah, I'm definitely picking up the phone. I love this draft class at receiver. I like it as just as much as everybody else, but there's no sure things in the draft, and we all know that. And I think that T. Higgins, Ayuk would be a pipe dream to me. I think that, they're going to want multiple first round picks for Brandon Ayuk, as they probably should. But I look at T. Higgins and I say, that's a guy that is going to give you an X receiver that's going to dictate coverage, that's going to be able to win one-on-one matchups against press man. And those are just really valuable players in the league. And that's something that the Patriots have been missing. And yeah, you might think that Keon Coleman or A. Mitchell or Xavier Legette is going to develop into one of those guys. But here's a ready-made version of it. And I would much rather go that route. Maybe that's my PTSD with the Patriots taking receivers, and N'Keal Harry's of the world. But I just think that it's obviously a safer bet. And that's the direction that I would go in if I could.
Where do you draw the line with Higgins? Are you willing to give up 2 picks this draft, or would you be more apt to give up the second round pick at 34 and then maybe a future, say, day 3 pick next year?
Yeah, I would much rather do the second one. I think that they have too many holes in the immediate future to give up too many assets from this year's draft. So even if you end up having to give up a higher pick in 2025, you worry about that a little bit in 2025, I think, with this team. So I would much rather give up, let's say, 34 and a third even next year than give up the 4th round pick that they have this year, which is essentially another top 100 pick. It's 103. So you're talking about getting really another guy in the top 100. So I would give up a higher pick next year than give up 2 this year.
All right, so you go QB at 3. You get a receiver somehow, some way, whether you pick him at 34 or you trade for him at 34. At that point, it's what? Tackle, 3rd round or bust. And if it is tackle, give the people maybe a couple of names, Evan, that might be a fit in that 3rd round at left tackle.
Yeah, so if they go left tackle at the top of the 2nd round, I do really love Sua Matia from BYU, who's Penny Sewell's cousin and has a lot of the same traits athletically as Penny Sewell, just not as polished coming out of college from BYU as Penny Sewell was from Oregon. So there's some development that's going to be needed there, but the athleticism, the ability to block in space, the ability to block zone schemes that they're going to run a lot of, he's very, very he has all the physical tools to be able to do all those types of things. Once we get into later in the draft and we start talking about 68 in the 3rd and 4th rounds, I do think that there's more guys on the right side than the left side. But Patrick Paul from Houston, a really good player, I think, immediately that could step in and start. Maybe not the highest ceiling in this draft, but has a ton of starts under his belt at Houston on the left side and probably could play right away at a decent level. I'd say the same thing about Roger Rosengarten from Washington, who played on the right side at Washington, but mainly did that because Penix was a lefty, and they wanted him on his blind side, believe it or not. So I could see Rosengarten be able to flip. Those 2 guys, I would say, are the more safer high floor guys. If you want the toolsy developmental guy, then Blake Fisher from Notre Dame is the other tackle from Notre Dame, who's only 21 years old, has a lot of raw tools. His technique and his balance needs a lot of work. But if you're starting to talk about the 3rd round, you're trying to bet on the upside there. And I think you look on film and you see a ton of pancake blocks in the run game, really good play strength, hand power, all those types of things. He just got to work a little bit on his balance and his body control, and then he'll be a starter down the line. So I like all 3 of those guys. I am starting to warm up a little bit to Fisher. I just wonder if he's more of a right tackle than a left tackle. tackle. So I'm interested to see where they view it, because if they really feel like Onwenu is going to hold down right tackle for the next 3 years, and they're only looking for guys that can play on the left side, then that market is a little bit smaller, I would say, on day 2 than the guys that can play at right tackle.
He's Evan Lazar, Patriots.com, of course. We got to get him out of here. He's got the KJ Osborne thing to take a look at. He gave me 30 minutes of his time, so he's got to get to do his actual day job and what he gets paid for. But again, Patriots Unfiltered, Catch 22, the podcast that he works on, Patriots.com. He does great work all the time. Evan, man, it's been great, having you on the show. Again, I respect your work. I respect and appreciate your story. You're a guy that has grinded and gotten to where you've gotten to, and I expect you to go even further with this. So maybe next time we'll go a little bit more than 30. People apparently love us as a combination, so maybe we'll do this again soon.
Absolutely, anytime, and thanks. I really appreciate it.
All right, brother. Thank you. So there goes Evan Lazar. We got to get him out of there. Sorry for the dual screen. I'll just grab a super chat here quick because Weinstab threw one in there. Instead of trading for a wide receiver with the second, how about using that asset for LT help? Evan, any trade options at left tackle? Look, we could talk about Conklin as somebody, as maybe a trade target, but here's the thing. Left tackle play, offensive line play has declined in the NFL, and it continues to decline. So usually when teams have a legitimate tackle to play, they will play that guy. And so I don't think you're going to be able to go out there and get somebody who would be a game changer, so to speak. I like the idea of signing Charles Leno, Mekhi Becton, the names that Evan and I talked about a little bit earlier in this podcast. Those guys make sense. I don't have an issue signing a bridge left tackle and then drafting a young developmental tackle maybe in the 3rd round if you don't get a receiver somehow, some way via trade. Perfect world, Amari Cooper, late pick swap. That would make sense. So then you don't have to necessarily feel like you've got to spend that 2nd round pick on a wide receiver. But there's a lot of different things this team can do. I just remind everybody it's March 20th. We're going to get to the draft. We're going to take a look at who's available at that point. Did the Patriots make a trade for a receiver? Who is that receiver? How does he fit? What kind of assets might you have to move to bring in a tackle? Long-term, short-term answers, all of those things. All of those things come into play. And there's just a lot. There's a lot of things that are unknown that I think we'll have a better idea as far as where we're going down what path within the next couple of weeks. There's reports out there that the Patriots are talking to teams about veteran wide receivers. Greg Bedard has written at Boston Sports Journal over the past couple of days. I do the pod with Greg twice a week during the offseason. And Greg has written that he would be surprised if the Patriots don't try to make a move at wide receiver, that he would expect it to a point, because Elliott Wolf showed the world that he knows that they need a significant addition to the wide receiver room. So there's still a lot that can unfold, All right, before we go, don't forget to give us that thumbs up. Like this podcast. If you're just jumping in, go back and check it out. Video on demand. We had Evan Lazar on for 30 minutes. We do this podcast every day at 11 a.m., Monday through Friday. If you like Evan, if you like an alternative, I would say give us a shot. Give us a shot. Listen to a week of shows. If you hate it, bounce. If you love it, stay. If you like it, give it another week. But give us that thumbs up. More likes means the world. That's how we beat the algorithm. So don't forget to like and comment. And if you stop by today, take a second of your time to subscribe. We're trying to hit 3,000 subscriptions by April 8th, national championship game. So we're, I think, just under 400 away from that number. So hit the subscribe button. You can get notified of the live podcasts and, all of the things that we do here. Patreon.com, exclusive content. One more thing I want to talk about before we go. Best case scenarios. As I paint it out and I look at the big picture from 30,000 feet, best case scenario for the Patriots, I would say, is to add a veteran left tackle. Get a veteran left tackle that you can depend on, somebody like Charles Leno. Then either draft a guy at 34 at wide receiver if an A.D. Mitchell falls and you think Mitchell is somebody who can be a legitimate number 1 wide receiver in the NFL. You like what he did at the Combine. Then you can stick and pick at 34. You can even trade into late 1st round to maybe draft a guy like Mitchell. Maybe you like Xavier Legette. Maybe you like Keon Coleman. But you've got to get a wide receiver somehow. You've got to get a guy who either you believe is a number 1 in the next year or two, or is a number 1 right now via trade. So the more I think about this and the more I see the the holes that they have and how they can address the holes, signing a veteran left tackle bridge, Mekhi Becton, Charles Leno. There are some other names out there as well, but I start with Leno. If you can get a guy like that signed, sealed, and delivered for a year, and then you go into the draft either via trade or a pick, and you use that second-round pick, or you move in late first to draft a young wide receiver, or you trade it for a T. Higgins/Ayuk. And I agree with Evan. Ayuk, I think, is less likely. But you make that deal for T. Higgins, well, now you've got a team, right? So we're all wondering right now on March 20th, what are they going to do at quarterback? What are they going to do at wide receiver 1? What do they do at left tackle? If you told me that we woke up, forget that. If you told me we're all having beers or beverages on Saturday night, April 27th, and we're looking at the Patriots with a Charles Leno at left tackle, A.D. Mitchell or T. Higgins at wide receiver, and Drake May or Jaden Daniels at quarterback, I think that's weaponizing the offense. And I think I would hope many of us would feel good about that plan coming together. So there's a lot of things that could unfold. We're still very early in this process. I know it feels like the last 9-10 days have been 9 or 10 years, but we've got the draft to get through. And people might sit there and say, well, what's the difference? I've seen this. What's the difference between the Patriots and, what the Red Sox have done this offseason? One of the major differences, one of the most significant differences is that you actually have a draft where you can bring players in and they can help right away. And I'm not telling you they'll hit home runs with every pick, but we saw it last year, didn't we? Christian Gonzalez before the injury, first round pick, major impact right away. That's the idea of having a pick in the top 3. Now, they might side with sitting the quarterback because they think he might need, a little bit more time, but you should theoretically draft a high impact player at 3. You should draft a high-impact player with the second pick in the second round. T. Higgins was at the top of the second round for Cincy a few years ago. So, yes, you can go out there and you can find, somebody who can impact this offense right away. As a matter of fact, you can find multiple people who can impact the offense right away. You found Pop Douglas in the 6th round last year. Now, that's not going to happen consistently, but you found Pop in the 6th round. So, that's the difference. Major League Baseball, you are impacting your current roster with free agency and international signings like Yamamoto. Football, you can go into the draft and say, we can trade for this guy, we can draft this guy, and you've got immediate impact. So that's the difference. That's the difference. By the way, some breaking news in the NFL. Cam Sutton has apparently had an arrest warrant issued for aggravated battery, domestic violence. So that's something to keep an eye on. Cornerback. So we know there are a few cornerbacks out there. I agree with Evan. The idea of Stephon Gilmore on a 1-year deal, $8, $9, $10 million, sign me up. Put him opposite of Christian Gonzalez. I would love that. I would absolutely love that. I do think they can continue to add defensively with this offseason in free agency. There is still talent that is out there. There's still talent that can help this team right away that exists in the free agency market. So we'll see what they do. There's a lot of work to get done. I will continue to do this podcast Monday through Friday, every day at 11 a.m. You don't want to miss it. If you enjoy the Evan Lazars and Andrew Callahans and Phil Perrys of the world, I think you'll like this podcast. So give us that like, the thumbs up, throw a comment in. Don't forget to subscribe. And exclusive content. We had a Discord chat last night. I've got an exclusive podcast on the Patreon that will drop tonight on the Patriots wide receiver situation. So if you want to look at that, it's patreon.com/Nick Cattle, Cattles. I'm out. Hopefully I see most of you back tomorrow. Thank you for joining us. It is very much appreciated. Again, Monday through Friday, this is the Nick Cattle Show. YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, Spotify, Apple Pods. Rate, review, and give us that thumbs up. Thank you for joining us. And again, thanks to Evan Lazar for spending 30 minutes of his time today. He does a lot of great work, and I appreciate Evan. So that was awesome. Everybody else, be well on this Wednesday. If something breaks, something significant, if it breaks, we'll be right here on this channel talking about it today. But if not, we'll talk to you tomorrow morning at 11 a.m. It's the Nick